Let's move on to alcohol laws. I don't know, of course, it made the news because it is Justin Timberlake. He initially, well, his lawyer kept saying he wasn't drunk. This has happened, and we should say that drunk driving killed more than 13,000 people for the second year in a row. That's in the US. Justin Timberlake, he was ordered to do 25 hours of community service and pay a $500 fine 3 months after he was arrested on suspicion of driving while intoxicated. Well, he was stopped in the early hours of June. He allegedly drove through a stop sign in his BMW after he'd been out with friends. He refused to have any tests, prompting an automatic 1-year suspension of his license. That was under New York law. So what are the laws around drink driving in the US? He seems to have got off fairly lightly. Is that because he's a celebrity?
Well, I think I would say that he did get off lightly, but it was one of the things I will mention is that the deal that was struck with the prosecutor to reduce the charge would have carried no suspension of a license or no community service. And the judge who was hearing it said, no, that won't work. I'm going to suspend your license for 3 months. I'm going to make you do 25 hours of community service and do a public service announcement. Has he gotten off lightly? Yes. I mean, in Florida, for example, where I am, drunk driving is taken very seriously. If you are arrested, you can't bail out of jail for a minimum of 8 hours, and more than that, more often than that, it's longer than that. The sentences are could be high. At a minimum, you're going to lose your license for a year. If you fail to take a sobriety test, that's automatic suspension of your license. God forbid you're in a situation where it results in a death. Where I once represented a woman who lost her husband to an impaired driver. He had been using something called a whippet, which is basically would make him high, which without getting into how, but it was another vehicle to get high. But the police were originally going to let him off lightly because they couldn't prove that he was actually high. And I then contacted the prosecutor and insisted that they do a further investigation. And then the guy actually tried to get his mother to intercede by going to a local rabbi to contact the victim's family. And it's ridiculous. I mean, the guy got 2 years in jail. We'll put it that way.
Right. He did. That's a good end to that story. Joseph, coming back to you again, drink driving. There was a video that they had, I think it was on the Daily Mirror, alleged drunk driver, Sean Higgins. I beg your pardon, that was in the US. But there was a moment a wife dobbed in her drunk husband for drink driving as he was being questioned by the police. This was in Leverington. The wife confirmed that the car was hers and said, yeah, he's drunk. But let's talk about drink driving sentencing in the UK.
Well, first of all, I wonder what he might have done to deserve that. But aside from the levity, the interesting thing is after the great developments in, I guess, the 70s to the 90s in drink drive awareness that kind of stigmatized the idea of drink driving rather than have a few beers and drive home, which was kind of something, I guess, from my parents' generation and earlier, which was kind of socially acceptable, really, because of a lack of awareness and education about it. We've seen a steady reduction in the numbers of deaths each year. Alarmingly, those have increased slightly, and I can't help thinking that the increase, slightly, about 50% to 300 a year from a low of around 200 a few years ago. I can't help thinking that's because there aren't enough police doing the proactive work, watching out for drink drivers and stopping suspicious drivers. That's another rant for another program, probably. But yeah, we do have stringent laws, I suppose, probably pretty much mirroring what we've heard from Mark in the state of Florida, a 1-year minimum disqualification. And that's really if your reading is only less than 55 micrograms in breath, which is, that's pretty low. That's just over the limit, really. So if if your reading is higher, kind of 70, 90, 100, you can expect bans of 2 and 3 years, albeit with a quarter off with a drink drive rehabilitation course. The reason those drink drive rehabilitation courses are offered with the discount of the length of your ban, of course, is because the education, generally speaking, does work. But yeah, it's a hell of a stigma, and you spend a night in jail. Usually, you certainly spend a significant amount of time in the police station when you're caught drink driving. And the reason for that is that they won't usually let you go until you breathe under the limit, so that you can't get behind the wheel again. But yeah, quite rightly.
But what about, Joseph, I was just going to say, Mark mentioned this whiff or whatever it was. Nowadays, it's not just alcohol, is it? It can be marijuana, absolutely. It can be driving under the influence. There's a whole load of other things other than alcohol now.
Yeah, and whippets, which I think probably we call nitrous oxide, the laughing gas type stuff. I think it's I'm not sure whether there are tests for that currently, but certainly swab tests for cannabis, and then followed immediately when you get to the police station with a urine or blood test. It exists, and there's stringent penalties. Same with harder drugs, cocaine, MDMA, etc. Anything which and these are all outlawed, and if they're in your bloodstream, I'd say the level that is required for you to be regarded as having broken the law and over the limit is actually more stringent than that of alcohol. So yeah, and I think the thing is, that legislation has been around for 30 years, but the ability for the police to check it on the move when they're stopping people didn't really exist except in the last few years. So people should be really aware of that. And you get casual cannabis smokers who might have only smoked the day before, but a lot, who fall foul of that. And I think that the lesson really there is just extreme caution with regard to driving while intoxicated from any substance, not just from a legal point of view, but of course, just at a basic respect, safety of other users.